In developing a theory to address this, Seligman 2012 selected 5 components that people pursue because they are intentionally motivating and they contribute to well-being. These elements are pursued for their own sake and are defined and measured independently for each other. Seligman 2012. Additionally, the 5 components included both eudaimonic and hedonic components, setting WPT apart from other theories of well-being. These 5 elements or components, PERMA, Seligman 2012, are positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. The PERMA model makes up WBT, where each dimension works in concert to give rise to a higher order construct that predicts the flourishing of groups, communities, organizations, and nations. Forgard, Wickerman, Kern, and Seligman 2011. Research has shown significant positive associations between each of the PERMA components in physical health, vitality, job satisfaction, life satisfaction, and commitment within organizations. Kearns, Waters, Alder, and White, 2014. PERMA is also a better predictor of psychological distress than previous reports of distress. Forgard, et al., 2011. This means that proactively working on the components of PERMA not only increases aspects of well-being, but also decreases psychological distress. And there's a video. PERMA thinkers in residence.
To my mind, let me say what a flourishing adult or a flourishing child has. Not just the absence of misery, but it's a real thing. It's the presence of 5 things. So the first is positive emotion, joy, comfort, happiness. I want to make sure you don't mistake positive psychology for the smiley face. So one of the 5 elements of positive psychology is smiling and being cheerful and being merry and being happy. But it's very important that you know that cheerfulness is normally distributed in the human population. And that means that there are 3 billion people in the world right now who don't feel happy or merry or cheerful. And the second thing to know, cheerfulness is strongly genetically based. It's about 50% heritable. And what that means to those of us who work on, I'm by the way in the lower half of positive affectivity, and by the way, I take my own medicine generally, so each of the exercises that I'll be telling you about are things that are first, if it works on me, I try it, then I give it to my wife and 7 children. If it works on them, I give it to my graduate students. If it works on them, we start to do clinical trials on it. What I think we have with the P, the smiley face, is about 15% leverage. And that means if you're a low positive affective, prone to depression and pessimism, there's about 10 to 15, I know tricks to get you to live in the upper part of a set range. And it's the genetics and the distribution of positive emotion that tells me that positive psychology is not a happyology. It's about engagement as well. The question of when time stops for you, when you're one with the music, when you're in flow. And we know something about that now. Mike Csikszentmihalyi is a leader in this field. Flow occurs, learning occurs in the classroom, and elsewhere when your highest strengths are just matched the highest challenges that come your way. And that notion says we need to know what children's highest strengths are. And I'll tell you something about that, as well as teachers' highest strengths in about 15 minutes. The third element of positive psychology is good relationships. And some of you are blessed with knowing how to bring off good relations, but good relations are a skill. And it turns out there have been discoveries in the last decade about that skill, discoveries that tell us we can teach good relationships to our children. The fourth element is meaning, belonging to and serving something you think is bigger than the self. The self is an impoverished site for meaning, but human beings, I believe, ineluctably search for meaning. I believe human beings have not only been individually selected, a la Dawkins, but also group selected, and that human beings are hive creatures, just like termites and wasps and bees. And I'll say more about that later. And the final element of flourishing for a child or an adult is achievement, accomplishment, mastery, and competence. So what I want to do now is take you in about 12 minutes through PERMA. And I think what I'm going to do here is tell you one thing about the science of positive psychology that your grandmother didn't know. Some people, you might think that your minister and your grandmother knew all this stuff before, but there are actually about 20 things that I didn't know 15 years ago that have been discovered. And then I want to tell you one thing we know about how to reliably build each of the 5 elements. So starting with PERMA, positive emotion, let me talk about smiling. Okay, I'm a photographer. Smile. Smile. Oh, okay. There are 2 kinds of smiles. There is a Duchenne smile, which is a genuine smile, and you can tell it by the muscles underneath the eyes. You can't tell it by the lips. And there is a stewardess smile. These are people who smile for a living. It's called a non-Duchenne smile. And in about 5 minutes, I could teach any of you how to go through pictures in the newspaper and identify whether or not the person was engaged in a genuine smile or a non-Duchenne smile. In 1970, the entire freshman class at Mills College was asked by the photographer to smile, and they did, and the yearbook was published, and half of them were displaying a Duchenne smile, and half of them were displaying an artificial smile. 30 years later, researchers from Berkeley called them up and asked them, how many divorces have you had? And it turned out that statistically, the women who were engaged in an artificial smile had more divorces, less marital satisfaction, and less life satisfaction. It's just one of the snapshots of the relationship of a snapshot of positive emotion to what goes on in life. I spend a lot of time predicting how long people are going to live. There's a great interest in under what conditions do people die prematurely and what is the psychological relationship of this. And people in Utah live longer than people in Nevada. That is a typical finding in this literature. Well, people in Nevada drink all night. They have drug addiction. They have sexual diseases. They don't believe in God. People in Utah get up at dawn and go to sleep at sunset. They don't drink. They believe in God. I have a T-shirt that says, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may be in Utah. So it's no surprise that people in Utah live longer than people in Nevada. So in order to do serious work on who lives long, you need a homogeneous group of people who don't stay up partying all night, who don't get sexually transmitted diseases, who believe the same thing, who have good medical care. And so there's an exemplary study of nuns. And one aspect of this great study of nuns has to do with the essay they wrote in the late 1930s, about 140 nuns. The bishop asked them to write an essay about why they were entering the convent. And about half the nuns used one positive emotion word, like I'm eager to serve Jesus. And the other half completely deadpan about it. More than 60 years later, the researchers came back and asked who was alive and who was dead. And I don't have the data with me, but it's approximately right. At age 85, 90% of the nuns who used one positive emotion word were alive versus 52% of the nuns who used none. And at age 94, 50% of the nuns who used one positive emotion word were alive versus 12% who used none. And that is, I'm not pulling these findings out at random. There is a growing literature, which I'm very interested in, on the relationship of PERMA to living longer, lower morbidity, lower healthcare expenditure. So those are a couple of things you wouldn't have known before. And let me just tell you something about the question, can you raise your positive emotion? I said in the spirit of the research I do, the ultimate research, I've spent a lot of my life working on drugs and psychotherapy and what works. And there's a gold standard methodology for that. It's the random assignment placebo-controlled test. And when I started to work on happiness, I asked, could you apply random assignment placebo-controlled testing to the 200 stories from the Buddha to pop psychology that have been told about can you be happier? And so when I'm about to tell you an exercise, when I tell you an exercise that works, it means it's been through random assignment placebo-controlled testing, so it actually works. So here's one. Every night for the next week, this is your assignment. Write down 3 things that went well today and why they went well. Turns out 6 months later, if you start to do that, you statistically have less depression, less anxiety, and higher life satisfaction. And importantly, it's addicting, that people like doing positive psychology exercises. Unlike psychotherapy, in psychotherapy, how many of you are psychotherapists? One of the dirty little secrets of I've been a psychotherapist most of my life. One of the dirty little secrets is that when we teach a patient something, its effectiveness is measured by how long it stays before it melts to zero. So for the most part, what we teach in psychotherapy and our pharmacology goes away in time. Positive psychology exercises are self-reinforcing. So that's the first one, P. Engagement, being one with the music, being in flow, using your signature strengths. So in order to begin to ask the question, how can you have more flow in life? We had to devise reliable instruments to measure in children and adults what their highest strengths are. And by the way, these are available for free at AuthenticHappiness.org. Part of my job has been to give this stuff away. And so you can go to this website with your class, with your children or yourself, take the signature strengths test and identify, compared to roughly 2 million people, what your signature strengths are and how they rank. Let me just tell you, these signature strengths are moral strengths. They're not talents. These are things that are valued in their own right, like gratitude, kindness, sense of humor, and the like. And let me just give you an example of what's been found out about using signature strengths as a builder of well-being. So if this was an overnight workshop, here is what I'd do. Tonight you would go to the website and you'd find out what your highest strength is. Might be something, Stephen, like social intelligence. then your job, and I'll do the exercise now, close your eyes. Think of something you don't like doing at work that you pretty much have to do at least once a week. Okay, open your eyes. Having found out what your signature strength is, what you're asked to do is to do that task using your highest strength. And so, for example, one of my students was a bagger at Gennardi. Do you have people who put, at supermarkets, who put the things in your bags? Okay, well, that's what she did. She didn't like doing it. She was working her way through school. And her highest strength was social intelligence. So her job was to recraft bagging using her highest strength. So she decided that she would make the encounter with her the social highlight of every customer's day. Now, importantly, she failed at that with a lot of the customers, but she put what was best inside of her on offer all the time, and begging became a lot easier after that. And in fact, when people do this, when they take something they don't like doing and find a way next week of doing it using their highest strength, it's addicting. You don't need, if kindness is your highest strength and you start using it in the office, people like you more, you get along better, and it's self-reinforcing. And 6 months later, statistically, you're less depressed, less anxious, and higher life satisfaction. Now, while we're on signature strengths, I want to say something about teaching and character. I'm very interested both in the character of students, and I'll tell you more about that later, but I'm fascinated by the character of teachers and of good teachers. How many of you are teachers? Okay, well, this is especially for you. The wandering starts with the question of what is it we're really trying to teach our kids? And I don't believe it's spelling and geometry. I believe these are the media through which we're trying to teach three much more basic elements. The first is social navigation, how to get an adult to like you, how to get along with peers. And I think when we teach, that's a gloss underneath it all. The second is rhetoric. It's an old word, but a real thing. Rhetoric is how to tell a good story, how to write a good story, how to ask the right questions, how to put the people you're talking to in touch with what's best inside of them. I think rhetoric is the second thing we're trying to teach. I'll say more about that in a bit. I mentioned the VIA signature strengths and the children's strengths, and I'll take you back to character and children in a moment, but I want to tell you something about great teachers and the right-hand side of the report card en route. So David Levin is the president of the 120 KIPP schools in the United States. These are charter schools for the poorest black kids in America. And they've been having terrific success with this. It's a positive education set of schools. And they give the usual left-hand side of the report card grades. But what they also do now is they've identified 8 characteristics, character strengths of kindergarten through 7th grade children that they want to build. Zest, grit, self-discipline, interpersonal self-discipline, optimism, gratitude, social intelligence, and curiosity. So each child, every semester, is rated on these strengths. And so, for example, for Zest, each child is rated on actively participates from 1 to 5, shows enthusiasm, and invigorates others. And discussions with the children and with the parents are often around the building of character. And I think very importantly, once you say there's a number you want, and if you don't measure the right thing, you don't do the right thing. But once you start to measure something, it goes up. People are interested in it. And character is one of those things. So that's a snapshot of what quite a few schools in America are starting to do that may be useful to South Australia. It's a wonderful conversation starter with parents, by the way. Now, we're interested in, this is a complicated slide, but it basically tells you two messages. These are the 24 character strengths that we believe are humanly universal. And when they occur close to each other, this is based on about 100,000 people, so this is a very meaningful slide. It means people who have fairness also tend to be modest. If they occur far apart, it means people who are modest tend to be people who have low zest. So this sort of tells you what co-occurs. And the second thing that's in this slide is different professions. So we looked at 4 different professions, and we asked, where are the practitioners of those professions located? So it turns out teachers tend to have this grouping of gratitude, love, kindness, and forgiveness. Unlike professors who don't have any of those things, they have creativity, love of learning, bravery, and perspective. CEOs, we find, have zest and hope, and administrators don't have that. They've got prudence, honesty, fairness, and modesty. So that's a description of character strengths of people in different professions, but notice this doesn't distinguish good teachers from bad teachers. So we asked the question, what distinguishes the character strengths of great teachers from everyone else? And they're very surprising to me. The 2 strengths that distinguish great teachers from the rest of us are zest and humor. And the reason I mention this is I'm going to talk in about 20 minutes about a vision for South Australia in which I talk about the teaching profession. And one of the things embodied in that is the notion that in the same way that in teacher education we teach teachers how to teach geometry, we can teach teachers how to teach well-being, and I think we should, but more than that, we should take what's known about great teachers. Humor and zest are teachable, and we should select for and teach those things. Okay, so what we've gone through so far is positive emotion and engagement, relationships, active constructive responding. Your spouse comes home from work. Are any of you marriage counselors? Okay. Marriage counseling is the worst form of therapy. People are lying to you, they're lying to each other, and its statistics on success are abysmal. I teach marriage counseling, I've done marriage and sex counseling, and a really tough form of therapy. What you try to do, what we teach our marriage counselors to do is to teach couples not to have the same fight over and over and over again. What you're trying to do essentially is to take insufferable marriages and make them barely tolerable. About 7 years ago, Shelley Gable, who will actually be speaking in Sydney next week, made an important discovery about marriage counseling. And it's about not teaching couples about fighting, but teaching couples about celebrating together. And this is not only true of marriages, but it's true of friendship and corporations as well. So your spouse comes home from work and she's been promoted. What do you say to her? Well, it turns out what I used to say to my wife in these circumstances was passive constructive, which is, congratulations, dear, you deserve it. That has no effect on anything. I teach drill sergeants. We've graduated our 7,000th drill sergeant recently. Drill sergeants are active destructive. They say, you know what tax bracket your promotion's going to put us into? Many of us are passive destructive, which is what's for dinner. It turns out the only thing that works, and when couples learn to do it, love, loyalty, commitment increase, the probability of divorce goes down, is active constructive. And that's Darling, I read that last paper you sent to the company on the pension plan. That was the single best paper I've read on fiscal matters in my 25 years in business. Now, would you relive what happened? Exactly where were you when your boss told you you had been promoted? She told you. Exactly what did he say? What do you think the real reasons you've been promoted are? How can you use those strengths more at church or with the kids or in our marriage? Let's go open a bottle of champagne. So that's when couples learn to do that, it increases the positives. So that's an important discovery. Meaning, belonging to and serving something you think is bigger than you are. Now, none of you probably need to be told that this is an ineluctable form of human desire, but your children do need to be told this. So your children probably think life is about things and shopping, and the economy runs on that. So we have a set of exercises that build meaning and purpose in children and adults. And one of them is when we have people write their own vision of a positive human future, and then they write their obituary through their grandchild's eyes about what they did to bring about a positive human future. We don't call it a life, we call it a life summary when we're dealing with depressed people. And that's a very good way of increasing meaning and purpose. Finally, for this part of the lecture, the A, accomplishment. So we're very interested in predicting high accomplishment in young people in the classroom. And in our typical experiments, these are done by Angela Duckworth, we measure self-discipline and grit. Grit is extreme persistence. Who rings the doorbell in every house in Adelaide? Extreme grit, extreme persistence. And we're interested in the relationship of self-discipline and grit versus IQ and talent to success in life. And the bottom line message of all these studies is that self-discipline is about twice as important statistically as how smart you are, as IQ, for measures of success. And again, for those of us who are teachers, that's a very important message.
I think that was very constructive.